I want to ask you, as a photographer, you called yourself an amateur. I would dispute that a little bit, but as a photographer and as a wildlife photographer, do you have a tip or a trick or a piece of advice for anybody as, how they can try and get images like this?
I think so. The key thing for wildlife photography, and everybody starts at the same place. Basically, you put your camera around your neck or you have your tripod on the shoulder and you're walking around, basically trying to get a lot of images. And you come back home with about sometimes 1,500, 2,000 images, and then you just sit down, wasting your time trying to shortlist, cull, throw, and then keep 500, put it in a folder, go out again, come back. You end up with about 15, 20 folders you've not looked at for over a year. So my perspective has changed a bit in the sense as I've got better, uh, I'll go looking. And let's put it this way. You have to find inspiration somewhere. So I find mine looking at the top photographers, um, looking at the perspectives, where the images are. For example, you look at the Natural History Museum, that's a fantastic benchmark in terms of photography and the awards the people are winning. You're trying to see what they're doing. And then you try to do the same in the sense, as I've got better, I've started looking at perspectives, backgrounds, and then trying to fit the subject in. So I'll show you a few of my images where a lot of them I've parked myself in a position where I know where the sun is in the morning or where the sun is in the evening in a park, and then waited for the subject to arrive. And then what happens is you will see your quality of your images just go through the roof. So it's not just about having a let's say a deer or a lion just sitting in a place, but you want something. You want an image like this where you want to capture some sort of motion or something. It needs to tell you a story. If you look at that image, you can see there's something happening in there. And for me, that is the key thing, I think. So when you're trying to capture, let's say, an image that is worthy of entering a competition, I'm looking for a moment in time or capturing a moment in time, something which tells a story. And you might not get the, let's call it the sights, the sounds, and the smells, but you can imagine the whole picture. And I like images which are not very tight, which show you a little wider perspective, more of the environment and things like that. And if you look at the award-winning images in the contests all over the world, they tend to be images which tend to have more negative space. That what has happened is, unfortunately, in the last few years, the Instagrams and the Facebook have forced people into grabbing what I call mug shots after mug shots after mug shots. Yeah, one or two is fine, but then the problem is you're losing the perspective of the image. You want to see, for example, a lion in the environment, a leopard in the environment, or a jackal doing something in its environment. Because you think of this image on the screen as well. If it was cropped to say 60%, it's not doing much. What makes this image beautiful is it's got the rule of thirds, it's got the doves trying to fly away, it's got the action, it's got the motion, and that's what I'm trying to do all the time as trying to improve my photography, is try to capture images that tell a story.
Well, you've obviously done very well with this image, and there is very much a strong story within this image that we've been had the privilege to actually get your insight into and the background. So, Ed, thank you so much for giving us all that information. So, welcome back to our WPC Inspiration series. And in this section, we are going to get the privilege of seeing how Edwin actually worked on his award-winning image for the World Photographic Cup. But not only us, of course, it was also the winning image in the land animal category of the British Photography Awards. I hope I've got that name right. So obviously,
You have indeed.
what we're seeing on screen is your original capture. Is that right?
Yeah, so this is the raw image that came out from the camera. If you can see, it was a bit dark because the light was going. It was about 5:45 in the evening. But if you can see the original image, the raw image, it's quite flat, but that's normal for a raw image. But the work I did on that subsequently is almost minimal. So all I've done is I've lifted a bit of shadows, lifted the brightness a bit, and then brought in a little bit of what you call horizon shift because it was slightly tilted to the top. But other than that, if you look at the image, original raw versus the final, I've hardly done anything. So
Mm.
it's almost as good as full frame. All I've done is I had to just straighten out the waterline a bit because it was a little bit going up on the left hand side. And then the rest of it is pretty much minimal. But that's the great thing about good photography is if you've captured a good image and the raw is half decent, you don't have to do much. And now that's the other thing I was talking about. Now, what has happened is given people are influenced by social media, there are some new editing techniques where people are introducing layers, putting additional sources of lights. Well, there's no wrong or right, don't get me wrong, but it's not my cup of tea.
Mm.
So I try to keep the image as natural as possible and minimal of. And that was the other thing the Team GB captain asked me, Tracy. She asked me for the raw file. Ed, can I look at the raw file? And I said, yes, you can. And how much editing did you do? I said, hardly anything. I've just lifted the shadows and increased the brightness and cropped it a bit to just straighten out the waterline. But that's the great thing about this image. And now more and more judges are beginning to, and they normally do once they shortlist, if you show them a raw image where you have over edited an image, then you lose brownie points, let's put it that way.
But it also,
So the good thing about this.
I should point out that it also depends on the competition. So some competitions allow for editing, whereas World Photographic Cup is one that does not. We don't allow for this category. There are some categories we do allow it for, but we don't allow for nature the changing of elements or adding elements or removing elements. So it's really nice to see that you've just taken your capture, your original capture, and made it into this beautiful image that we're seeing in front of us. I noticed though you had another picture on screen. Was that a picture of all your gear that you can show us?
Yes, that was the one which I was going to show you. So you asked the question about the gear we use, and that is the one. That's an f2.8 400 millimeters. So you see the front
Wow.
element, it is huge.
Mm.
And that is what gives us, for example, that image that I captured of that jackal, I would have probably missed it if I didn't have another stop of light because the
Mm.
light was almost going. And that's where this f2.8 makes a difference. And because it's f2.8, you see the front element is huge.
Mm.
And then I use a zoom as well because you don't get a chance to change your lenses on the field. So generally I tend to use three bodies or two bodies at least. So I have a prime on one and I have a zoom on the other. And then I keep a wide angle so that if in case I need to go wider for whatever reason, I've got all of them on the seat on the adjacent to me so I can reach out and just pull out the camera with the lens I want.
So what's the weight in that 400 millimeter lens?
So this one weighs about 3 kilos. So it's about six and a half pounds. With the camera, it's about say 7 to 8 pounds. And with the tripod, yeah, it's quite heavy. But
Mm.
that's because the sheer glass that it has inside of it is huge.
Mm.
And that's where also it gives you that advantage of that one stop of light.
Mm.
And to be fair, I've got this very old camera here, which is still a DSLR 60 Mark II, which I still use. So it's not the camera, but it's the lenses that make the difference as far
Mm-hmm.
as I'm concerned. And the key thing for us as well on the field, because we don't get, you never know. It's just nature of wildlife. Sometimes you could get a lion right next to your window, and you're snookered with a prime lens of that length. At the most, you'll get the mug shot of the face. But if you've got a zoom lens, it just gives you a chance to pull back a bit and get some images.
Mm. Well, obviously, you're doing something right. You've been able to get some amazing images that have won some pretty spectacular awards. Congratulations again, Edwin. I do appreciate so much the time you've taken to give us a little bit of insight into how you work and your gear and all about your winning image. So, from us at WPC, we look forward to meeting you in Quito, in Ecuador, in just over a month's time. It won't be long.
Yes.
And thank you for being part of the WPC Inspiration Series.
Thank you, Kylie. It's been a pleasure and look forward to seeing you in Quito.
Excellent.
Bye.
Bye bye.